Well, my name is Terrence Bird. I am a student at Eastern Michigan University. I'm majoring in technology management, but I'm also a student in human resource management. And today we'll be bringing to you a topic of human resource management that's called workplace harassment. We'll be discussing workplace harassment, the impact that it has on the American labor force, and the preventative measures that employers can use to try and help reduce the amount of recurrent incidences. Workplace harassment can be defined as the belittling or threatening behavior towards an individual or a group of workers, but it's also going to be defined as the social manipulation of an individual or a group of workers or a worker. There are predominantly two types of workplace harassment, and even though they can be broken down into various subsets, that's emotional abuse and physical abuse. The most common form of physical abuse that falls under the category of workplace harassment is sexual harassment. Most notably, in the media in recent times, even though it's still kind of old, I would have to say is the 1991 court case where Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas was sued by his secretary Anita Hill, where she said that he made sexually suggestive comment, lewd behavior, and even alluded to there being a pubic hair in his coke or something like that, and that he groped her once or twice. I do know that he ended up being acquitted of all charges, but what it did is it brought a national spotlight to the attention of what women were going through at the workplace and actually gave them more courage to step up and make complaints. There was actually an article in the Huffington Post at the beginning of this year in February that was written where it said that as many as 1 out of 3 women have experienced sexual harassment at the workplace. Now, even though Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination for superficial reasons, non-business reasons like sex, gender, religion, or race, there are certain jobs where women are expected by their employers to put up with a certain amount of sexual harassment. And those two areas are the food and service hospitality industry, and particularly waitresses and tour guides. Now, these women sometimes feel accosted by customers and they're scared to go to their bosses because when they were hired, they're initially told that they're supposed to put up with a certain amount. But sometimes those lines get blurred and the women hold it in and it causes stress on the job. Now, as far as men being sexually harassed at the job, it's not really taken seriously. People sometimes even laugh out loud when it's brought up. Studies have shown, however, in the last 15 years, the amount of men complaining to the EEOC filing sexual harassment complaints has doubled, and in 2006, as many as 2,000 men in the American labor force filed sexual harassment complaints. There was also an article written by the NBC News in 2007 by a woman named Eve Tomasia-Glue, where she talked about an incident that happened in Tampa, Florida, where there was a Domino's female supervisor who was making sexual advancements towards a Domino's male manager that he rejected. And when he rejected those advancements, she fired him. And he sued her in civil court and was actually awarded $227,000 in damage. I myself have also been a victim of sexual harassment on the job as a man. I didn't report it. I didn't really take it seriously when I was at Work Skills Corporation as a production worker before a quality control inspector. I've been groped by a female coworker. I was kind of flattered. I didn't really feel threatened by it because I know she can't like physically accost me or impose her will on me. The second time that it happened, I was actually working out in Livonia in the office filing paperwork, and I was bent down filing papers in the bottom of the filing cabinet. And the manager walked in, and she was like, "Woo! Looks like I walked in here at the right time." And I kind of just laughed about it, because she was pretty much saying, I had a nice looking bottom or whatever or whatnot. And like I said, I knew, it's a female. She can't really physically oppose her will on me. So it's different for us than it is for women because women know that sometimes men making comments, but they leads up to stalking and possibly actually being raped. We don't have that same threat of violence coming from women sexually that they have versus us. There was actually a study done in the Williams Institute in 2011 that stated that around 4% of the American workforce, which is roughly 8 million people, belong to the LBGT community. The discrimination that they've experienced on the job is they're afraid that people knowing that they're homosexual in a predominantly heterosexual environment. So they've been blackmailed by coworkers and they're scared for people to find out their true sexual orientation. And those who have came out have been subject to, things like rude comments, unwanted stares, ostracized somewhat. The EEOC reports that minorities, particularly blacks and Asians, make the most amount of complaints as far as workplace harassment. A lot of the workplace harassment reports made by blacks aren't actually filed under racial discrimination because a lot of employees are aware of Title VII, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that prohibits racial discrimination on jobs. So they will do something, but they will not attach race to it, but race is the motive. And the last thing that we would discuss as far as physical abuse falling under the category of workplace harassment is actual physical violence. And there was a study done by the Northwestern National Life that stated that as many as 15% of the American labor force said that they have been physically accosted at work. And of those 15%, 22% say they've been involved in pushing and shoving, 13% say that they've actually been involved in fist fights, and 1% of those 15% were women who were actually raped on the job. So now we'll talk about the second aspect of workplace harassment, which is the emotional aspect. And most notably right now, what's going on is called emotional bullying or workplace bullying. It's also been given a nickname called mobbing. And what happens with this is, maybe for instance, somebody tells another coworker, if I catch you in my area, I'm gonna put my hands on you. Or maybe you have a lisp or a speech impediment, someone's making fun of the way you talk. Or maybe you're overweight, somebody making references to how you look, your body, or how you dress. And what it does is it causes depression and irritability, and it makes people not really want to come to work. Now, workplace bullying happens a lot between coworkers, but for the most part, it really happens from management top down to the employees. Because management knows that they hold the key to your employment. It's easier for them to get away with it. It could be so much as, you ask your manager something because you did something he don't like, he gives you silent treatment. It could be your manager yelling at you, which is unprofessional. It could be your manager just outright insulting you. And it can also be your manager accusing you of making mistakes you didn't make. And I was actually a victim of that at Work Skills Corporation when I was a quality control inspector. I was taken off the job, but I wasn't told, and I was placed back on the belt that sent the parts to the quality control inspector. But I trained the quality control inspector, the new one, before we switched jobs. But there was one day we were at work, and I don't know if he was in the bathroom, but I knew that we were behind on production. So I ran over to the other end to my old job, quality to inspect the parts, and someone came out of the management office and told me if they caught me over it again, I would be fired. Now this perplexed me because when I was quality control inspector, when we didn't have enough workers, I would go back and forth from the belt and send myself parts to inspect myself because didn't have enough workers, and they never said anything to me. So about an hour later, when I was back on the belt, they called me in the office and they asked me had I ever been explained why I was removed as quality control inspector, and I told them no, I really didn't care because I didn't like that job. And they said that someone said that they observed me not properly inspecting the parts. And I was confused because I did that job for over a year and inspected over 1 million parts without one complaint to General Motors, because what we were doing, we were inspecting engine lift brackets for the assembly line of General Motors. And I'm like, I'm inspecting a 1/4 inch part looking down. If you're standing 10 feet away, there's no way you could tell whether or not I'm examining that part correctly. You pretty much have to trust the integrity of your worker. And, if I'm doing over 1 million parts and not getting any complaints, any fines, anything like that, nobody's that lucky. Clearly, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. They made me sign a piece of paper that I would never try and do that job again. And then they put me on another job that's more critical as quality control inspector. So I know I didn't do anything wrong, and actually found out that I was a victim of workplace bullying just from doing the research on this topic. Now, we'll talk about the impacts that workplace harassment has had on the American labor force. It can cause employees to become depressed. It can cause employees to develop alcoholism problems. It can cause employees to exhibit the same symptoms as post-traumatic stress disorder. Like when employees pull in the parking lot, like their vitals change, like their blood pressure increases, like it's like returning to like the scene of a crime or a war zone, reliving it all over again because they really don't want to be at work because they experience that same negative treatment every day. And one of the things that I think that employers can do as far as putting in preventative measures to help reduce the amount of recurring incidents is to set up a training program for the employees, set up a training program for management, and then also set up a training program where you have the employees and management working together, and afterwards have everybody sign a piece of paper stating that they understand the company policies and what falls under the parameters of workplace harassment, and if they violate them, that they will be terminated. Now, to add to this, I feel like at least once a month, everybody should be pulled together and they should read off the list of what's considered workplace harassment just to remind them. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this speech. I thank you for listening. I want to just go over what we talked about. We talked about workplace harassment. We talked about what is defined as belittling and threatening behavior towards the individual or worker, or the social manipulation of a worker. We talked about it just broke down into two aspects. You have the physical aspect, which is predominantly mostly sexual harassment, even though it does sometimes involve actual, like fist fights and pushing. We talked about the emotional aspect, where it talks about maybe coworkers demeaning each other or management using their positions to belittle you and making you feel unwanted. And what the employer can do themselves to help reduce these incidences, which are training programs, um, signing signatures stating that everyone is aware of the policies, and also as far as reminding them. I thank you. Good evening.